Hello everybody and welcome to my remastered 2020 awards. I had one on my old channel but I wasn't happy with the quality of that one, mainly because the camera on my old laptop is pretty shit and I had some problem with the game footage and so on and so forth, so the end quality ended up being a bit poop. So I thought, for my new channel, let's remaster it. We're only about a week or so into 2021, so what the hell. Anyway, 2020 was a little bit of a shitter, to be honest. Even before the pandemic hit, things weren't all that great, to be honest. However, due to quarantine and, my work situation and stuff, I've had more time to play video games this year, and I've played some excellent ones. My awards show, therefore, is going to highlight 10 of the best. One thing to note as well is that it will cover games that I've played this year, not games that were released this year. So there will be games that came out before 2020, and that's just an inevitable side effect in order to ensure that I have a good pool of games to work from. So how I'm going to do is I'm going to start with 5 miscellaneous awards and then finish with my 5 games of the year. The latter of which is not my top 5, just like the top game from a particular category. I don't want to be pitching like a one-man dev project against a huge AAA title. It'd hardly be fair, to be honest. The miscellaneous awards too will not be repeats of the big 5 either, so there will be 10 unique games in this list. Anyway, so let's get cracking. When it comes to visuals, I'm more fond of artistic design rather than realism. Realism has its place and can look stunning, but without an artistic design to tie it together, fancy graphics can look pretty bland. It's often the reason why games that have aged well, such as like The Wind Waker for example, don't have realistic graphics, but the art style alone makes it timeless. This year I played quite a few games that succeed in creating an aesthetic that will endure the ages, and for me, Void Bastards was the cream of that crop. Void Bastards goes for a comic book style in first person, very much akin to the likes of the original 13. However, unlike that title, VB is set in space, and that allows for a more unique and weirder designs. Everything has a cartoony cel-shaded design, and even the sounds are given comic book style text that punctuate every sound. It not only adds to the style, but allows for functionality too. You can recognise enemies by the sounds they make and the accompanying text. It really helps you pre-prepare for the fight, or to run away. In addition to the main gameplay, the game treats you to some fantastic comic strips between chapters, and they help fill in the minimal story that the game has. It all adds to the charm which the game just has in spades. As much as it pains me to say anything complimentary about Gearbox, let alone give them an award, I have to say they did Duke well with the Duke Nukem World Tour. It looks and sounds great in the improved version with the ability to switch to new and old, and the new episode is pretty much fantastic in look, sound and gameplay. It's dirt cheap to boot as well. Good job Gearbox. Kick Randy Pitchford to the curb and we may end up being friends. Anyway, since we're here for the music, here's a little bit of the soundtrack for you to listen to at your leisure. Surprisingly, a number of games I've played this year have had a decent storyline, but only one had me completely invested all the way from start to end, and that was The Outer Worlds. Made by Obsidian, they take the Bethesda RPG formula and they put their own twist on it. Instead of having a huge open world, the game is comprised of multiple smaller worlds that you can tackle and then move on with rarely a need to come back. Doing so has allowed them to craft much tighter story experiences, and it's less likely to bog you down due to backtracking or just getting sidetracked by other stuff. This has resulted in a cast of interesting characters that you generally care about and you want to help. Not just companions, but other NPCs too. The story focuses on you, a colonist aboard the Hope, and you've been awakened to help out the mad scientist Phineas Wells. As a blank slate, you can choose exactly who you want to be, and that extends to the missions ahead. You can even make your character dumb as a plank for some interestingly stupid dialogue. Like the games it's inspired by, you can choose your own path, and it does so damn well. Once again, Bethesda has been outdone at their own game by Obsidian. Obsidian did it with New Vegas, and they've done it again with Outer Worlds. Such a fantastic narrative experience. Quite a few games have surprised me this year, and my pick was a title that came right at the end of it. All through the year I was sure Elder Scrolls Blades was going to nab it, after I had a whale of a time with it. However, it was snapped from them at the 11th hour by a little game called Cyber Protocol. For transparency, Cyber Protocol was gifted to me by the dev to cover my indie stream. I wasn't exactly excited for it, but it was a free game that looked like it could be okay. I was expecting to play it and then probably abandon it. Screenshots looked basically like Cyberpunk Pac-Man, and that's what I was expecting. That is not what it ended up being. Cyber Protocol is a maze game where you have to navigate your way around different obstacles and find the exit. The Pac-Man-like pellets serve two functions, main one being that they guide you to the exit, but the second being that there's an added challenge for higher level players in collecting them all. The game starts out quite simple and gradually throws in some additional obstacles with reasonable frequency. You're given enough time to get used to the current one before you need to learn a new one. The learning curve is especially well done, with the game feeling like it's pushing you further and further in little steps. With 100 main levels, the game will take you a while to complete, but that's not all. There are bonus unlockables gained from collecting bonus icons, a multiplayer mode where you go head to head with other opponents, and even when you beat the game, there's enough here to drag you back in the future to nail down that 100% completion. Cyber Protocol really sunk its teeth into me and I was hooked all the way through. Not every level is a winner, sure, with some needing maybe an extra checkpoint to help prevent frustration from replaying large chunks, but most are excellent and a lot of fun. The game regularly goes on a deep sale too on the eShop, so there's no reason not to pick it up and give it a shot. It certainly was a big and pleasant surprise. Paratopic is a strange little game to describe. If I tell you too much, it'll ruin the experience. If I say too little, you won't understand the appeal, but I shall certainly try. The game appeared out of nowhere with its strange title and cheap price. For all intents and purposes, it hid itself among the usual eShop shovelware, but I noticed it. I saw the PS1 style graphics and its general weirdness, and it drew me in. Boy was I in for a surprise. In essence, it's a walking simulator that follows the exploits of the three protagonists. One is an assassin, the other a smuggler, finally a photographer. The journeys are relatively similar and interwoven, but they play out in different ways. For the most part you'll be walking, but you also drive, take photos, explore. The whole experience doesn't last much longer than say an hour, but no doubt you'll want to replay it again and again in order to piece everything together. It's very much akin to the likes of Lynch's Inland Empire, in that it's basically an unsettling assault on your senses, and it will draw you in and creep you out. While it may not be for everyone, sure, it's certainly one hell of an experience. Should this sound intriguing to you, I'd say jump straight on in. Right, well after those great games, let's take a little bit of a breather before we go on to the final 5. Now these are the big ones. These are the top game for each category, so these are the creme de la creme of the stuff that I've played this year. Right, let's jump straight on in with a cracker. The first of my big Game of the Year awards goes to Super Punch Patrol for being the best budget game of the year. While it may seem like such a broad topic and it would have fierce competition, the fact is that most games cost under a fiver tend to be either on sale or are just pure shovelware. There were a few gems though this year, and Super Punch Patrol was the best of those. Made by Holberg Productions, sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, which I believe is just one guy, the game's essentially Streets of Rage but with a sketchbook art style. Think of his Gunman Clive game, but as a beat 'em up. You'll have a general idea. Like most beat-em-ups though, the game's not generally long, but what it lacks for in length it makes up in replayability and challenge. Going in at the easiest difficulty will be challenging for solo players, but then that's eased up when you're playing with others. If you think it's too easy, the hard modes will just kick your ass. The enemies and bosses are all well designed and fun too, with some of the best beat 'em up bosses I've ever encountered. And that's not all though. As with all beat 'em ups, you earn points throughout the course of the game. Now usually this is like a high score thing, and that alone is the reason to replay it. But this game takes it one further. Those points you earn go towards costume unlocks for the characters, so this provides added incentive to replay rather than just gaining a higher score than last time. I really can't understate how great this game is for the price. I'd even go as far as to say it's better than Streets of Rage. It's that good. The Switch is a treasure trove of ports and retro titles. Many classics from gaming history have been brought over, either individually or as part of a collection. One such retro collection is Super Mario 3D All-Stars. Now part of me doesn't actually want to give it an award just because of how lazy the collection is. Super Mario 64 wasn't made widescreen or even have border selections. It's shrunk down to 4:3 with black around the outside, and the selection menu is bare bones with almost no extras. For the most part, it's just a few emulating Mario games with very little in the way of improvements or extras. But boy are those Mario games good. Super Mario 64 feels the most bare bones of the three. It looks nice in HD, but they didn't bother to make it widescreen, and those black borders are all you're stuck with. While the controls are mostly functional for how the game's made, they're not really particularly tight either, and it can make precise movements a bit of a pain. The camera though is the biggest issue. Moving from buttons to the analog only makes it even trickier to deal with than it was before, and it really wasn't the best then. With that being said though, the game is still mostly fun to play. It's definitely front-loaded with regards to quality, but there are still excellent courses later on too. Super Mario Sunshine is the highlight of the package in my opinion. Despite being extremely old, the art direction has resulted in a fantastic transition to HD. The game looks like it could be a current gen title, it's that good. Those vibrant colours are absolutely timeless. The game has aged extremely well. Whilst the lack of course variety put me off back in the day, I now appreciate the consistent theming since it feels like more of a cohesive world and it allows them to tell a story. Yeah, the game has a story, with voice acting and everything. Like, good voice acting. Controls are super responsive, camera's definitely better than 64. It's not a perfect game, you can clearly tell it's rushed. Some shines are frustrating and janky, like the Poison Leaf ride for example. The blue coins as well, they take a fantastic idea and just ruin it. If the game had like loads more blue coins, and you needed way fewer to buy all the shines, it would have been excellent. I definitely recommend getting maybe like 100 shines though in the game, and just moving on to Super Mario Galaxy. The 3D All-Stars collection was actually my first experience with Galaxy, so I was pretty excited to play it. It has some really solid platforming in it, but I also feel it's the weakest of the three. The controls aren't as responsive as Sunshine, although they are better than 64. The level design too lacks any sense of cohesion. There are tons of power-ups that just come and go. Do you remember the boot power-up? Of course you don't. You use it like a couple of times, minimally, and then it gets dumped. Stuff like the bee and the spring fare a tad better, but still underutilised. And the flowers? What a waste of time them even being in the game. I also don't care as well that many planetoids are extremely small with their own challenges, and then you fly to somewhere else that you can't even see. There's no anticipation for what's ahead, and the platforming challenges you face on tend to be completely different. It's a very disjointed experience, but you can't deny that what is there is fun platforming for the most part. Whilst for me it's the worst of the three, it's still far better than most platforming games and earns its spot in the collection. All in all, the package is a lousy celebration for the 35th anniversary, but the games inside are still fantastic and worth owning, before Nintendo removes them from sale of course. Now as for the best port category, these differ from retro by being limited to games that have been ported from the last generation of consoles. This deserves to be its own category due to the sheer number of these ports that the Switch has received. I've been a big fan of the Pikmin games since the original GameCube release. The first was great fun, albeit being slightly stressful, but in a good way. The second two was great with some fantastic additions, although the caves were slightly overdone. I never got a chance to play the third game though, due to it being tragically on the Wii U. This port though manages to rectify that and rekindle my love for the series. The main game adds a time limit from the original with limited supplies, although it's never really that much of a concern. It adds some great environments, puzzles, bosses to make it a wonderful experience, and even though it never gets very hard, the series benefits from having various counters to fruit, Pikmin deaths, days passed, so making self-imposed challenge runs are pretty easily to implement for those wanting an additional challenge. Speaking of challenge though, the mission mode adds over 50 levels for you to work through, and there's a time limit and you gain medals. Collecting fruit and battling enemies make up the most of it, but additional side story missions add extra variety. And don't forget the boss refights too. The missions are a great addition and getting platinum can be a real challenge in a lot of them. There's also a bingo mode too, where you have a small map and you need to make a line of randomly generated requirements before your opponent does. It's a lot of fun, but honestly Nintendo kinda dropped the ball by making it local only. Hopefully they add online later, since really that's my only gripe with Pikmin 3. Seriously, all of you go out and get it. If you've never played it before, it's just as fun, and the additional side stories and difficulty modes should give you the incentive to replay. If you haven't played the game before, you're in for a real treat, and you really don't need to play the other games too. This is a very worthy award. Now we're moving on to the final two big hitters, and the first up is Best Indie Game. Indie games have been my bread and butter this year with the launch of the Indie Spotlight. I've played loads of indie titles, a lot of which have been absolutely fantastic. One game though beats out the rest, and not even close. This game is fantastic. It's not only the best indie game I've played this year, but probably one of my favourite games on the Switch. How the hell did I not know beforehand that this game was so damn good? I had known that this game existed before, but due to accompanying phrases relating to tower defense and whatnot, it kinda kept it away from my radar. This year though, I finally played it and I was in for a treat. In fact, there was so much to praise that I don't even know where to begin. The story, as nonsensical it is, follows Atlas. He's tired of holding up the world while God pisses around creating animals and decides to bugger off. On his journey he meets various historical figures and gets involved in battles with them. Sound weird? Well, that weirdness is amplified tenfold with Monty Python-esque cutscenes that are played throughout the story. As for the gameplay, there are two main parts. Half of the time it plays a little bit like Marble Madness or Monkey Ball. You guide a boulder through the course and you try to reach the castle door of your opponent. The more damage you take, the slower you hit the door, it results in less damage dealt to the opponent's castle door. Each course is completely unique and no two feel alike. One minute you're blasting across aqueducts and the next you're dodging windmills, going through tight corners. They've done well to make sure this always feels different. However, while you're hammering away at the door, the opponent's doing the exact same thing. Luckily, constructing a new boulder takes time, and that gives you the opportunity to place obstacles and traps in order to damage, slow down, or destroy your opponent's boulder. Each trap is unique and some are more beneficial than others depending on the layout of the level. Cannons and bows are great for long pathways, but otherwise they're pretty useless. Walls and sheep don't do that much other than slowing you down, but they're useful in aiding other traps or for just messing up platforming sections. Unfortunately, the game doesn't offer any kind of tutorial to help with how to use the stuff, and it leaves it mostly down to trial and error. However, experiencing different obstacles will clue you in how to best to use them against your opponent. As well as unlocking obstacles throughout the story mode, you also unlock a variety of characters and boulders by simply beating the relevant opponent. In addition to the standard levels, there are also obstacle course races for each course. These are like a one-on-one race with your opponent throughout the level, and more obstacles are placed in your path each time. The first person to 3 is the champion. Bosses also appear from time to time too, and they offer a nice change of pace. None are particularly difficult, but they're generally fun, except for the final boss. It's a brilliant idea, but very poorly executed. And if you think you've got the game down, there's a time trial mode, so you can go for gold medals. And their times are relatively tight, but very doable. You can show off how good you are too by taking the game online and facing down a real opponent. Seriously, this game is almost perfect. Whilst the end boss leaves the game ending a little flaccid, the rest is just an absolute delight. Now surprisingly, most games I've played this year have been indie titles. so my top AAA pick wasn't as hotly contested as I expected it to be. It doesn't make any less great a game though. Yoshi's Crafted World turned out to be a total surprise. I played the demo and it bored me. I don't even know why I ended up getting the game, to be honest. I think it was predominantly due to the art style, which they pretty much nailed, to be honest. In addition to Yarn Yoshi, the rest of the world looks like it was handcrafted by school kids. The bosses too are assembled from various household bits and bobs, and their introductory cutscenes even go as far as to show them being assembled. The only real omission artistically are the enemies, which just kinda look like normal enemies. They really missed a trick by not making them Yarn too. Play-Doh or whatever could have worked as well, just to make it fit a bit more seamlessly. This doesn't really matter too much in the long run though, as the game's just so much fun. As Yoshi, you travel across a wide variety of worlds, each consisting of 2 or 3 levels and the occasional boss fight. The worlds have a set theme, be it underwater, a ninja castle, prehistoric times, etc. A far cry from the standard forest, lava, snow, etc. that make up most platforming titles. Getting through each level is straightforward, but the challenge consists of gaining all the flowers in each one. Beating each level opens a flip side variant of the level, where you play it from the end to the start, and you view it from the back. Many levels contain gimmicks as well that you need to overcome, and some even go as far as ditching platforming for something completely different. Variety is in spades with Crafted World. The game isn't perfect, sure. The music tends to be the same few tracks over and over again, doesn't really change up that much, and sort of gets on your tits. The game has a weird difficulty spike too with a true final boss, and doing it damageless for the final flower is borderline cruel. But those don't spoil the game. It took me a fair while to 100% everything, and I had a blast while doing so. Not only that, but I plan to replay it and even speedrun it at some point. It's such a fantastic title and a very relaxing experience to offset the horrendous 2020. So there we have it, my 10 games of the year for this year. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope it's definitely an improvement from the last one. I will see you at the end of the year for my games of the year for 2021. Bye everyone.